So I guess I'll get started. That way you
Well,
can.
wait, I got to introduce him as the most interesting man in the Episcopal Diocese of Chicago.
Coming from Bob Wyatt, that's quite a compliment.
World traveler, adventurer, and director of development and most important Chicago institutions.
So I am Michael Cleavenger, and I am the Senior Director of Development for Episcopal Charities and Community Services. I've been there about 2.5 years. For 20 years almost, I have worked with the different agencies, helping them with board development. This is all pro bono work for the agencies. Board development, how to raise money, et cetera, et cetera. And I gave you those pieces because I think, one, we need to visualize what the diocese really looks like. The Diocese of Chicago is really the Diocese of Northern Illinois. There are about 127 churches in it, and there are 17 agencies. And so that just gives you a brief overview of our history, and I think it's something you can take home and read, because most people don't know the breadth of what we do. You know, let me start with something, and then I'll go into our history and that sort of thing. But the other piece you have there is a reminder of the ball. And I don't normally advertise for the ball, but I think this year it's important, not that you want to come, but who we're honoring. And we're honoring the very Reverend Catherine Jefford Shorey and the Reverend Jim Steen. And the reason we're honoring, and this is, I had to pull teeth to do this, but I think the reason it's important to note both of those persons is that Jim in this diocese and Catherine on a national level have really worked hard to keep our church together in some very strenuous times. You know, there are a lot of disagreement about who we are and what we practice and all that sort of thing, and they have done a yeoman's job politically around the country trying to keep us on track, and whether you agree with them or not in one way or another. So that's why we chose to honor them. Our honoree last year, unfortunately, Pat Drew, has passed away, and my timing is good. She herself did so much work for this church, and you know, we will miss her and bless her. So there is a new dean at the cathedral, Dominic Barrington, and if you haven't heard him, and if you're downtown for some reason, he's doing a great job at pulling the cathedral back together and growing it. And he wrote this about this Sunday, and so I thought I'd read it to you, and then I thought I'd do a little prayer, and then I'll give you some information here if you don't mind. So not to give you a second sermon, I tried to avoid that because I don't do sermons very well. So, you know, for this Sunday we have the joy and the privilege of falling back in awe in recalling all that God has done on that long, costly journey from Advent through Pentecost, and just celebrating the fact that God is God. That's the point of Trinity Sunday, a reminder that if we let God be God, God does amazing things, because God is a God of love, constantly inviting the created to sit with the Creator to feast on an eternal, rich, and wonderful banquet. So I thought that was a good statement about this Sunday and where we are. So I have a prayer here, and the reason I read this prayer is that I think it sort of encapsulates the work of Episcopal Charities, and it's so I'm going to read it to you, or if you would pray with me as we do this. God with us, you did not put us in this world alone. You gave us people to live beside, to keep us company, to share skills and resources, to stop from getting bored. Thank you for good neighbors, people who are kind, people who are funny, and people who notice if something is wrong. God, beside us sometimes we don't like our neighbors. We can't believe you really meant them when you said, love your neighbors. Did you, God? Not the noisy or the nosy ones, not the messy ones, not the ones whose children don't behave, who dress or manners we don't like. If you really did mean them, God, we're going to need your help. Help us not to be too quick to judge. Help us to hold out a hand of friendship. Help us to remember that loving our neighbors is not what we feel, but what we do. Amen.
Amen.
And I think that is the work of many in this room and many in Episcopal Charities. Our mission at Episcopal Charities, and our mission has not changed, although the direction of that mission is changing. And our mission statement says it's to transform lives. Episcopal Charities and Community Services supports and strengthens its ministry partners, congregational outreach programs, and other faith-based ministries of Christian service that offer hope to all the people in the Diocese of Chicago. And the programs we encompass serve some 60,000 families in the city of Chicago. You can see here on this how far back, and many of you will know this, for instance, Lawrence Hall is 150 years old, so we've been at this work a long time. Not as Episcopal Charities, but as the Diocese of Chicago and the Episcopal Church. So we were founded in 1960, and God has used our ministry to transform thousands of lives in the Diocese of Chicago. Today, this life-changing social outreach is accomplished through ECCS's support of ministry partners, and particularly through new ventures and capacity-building initiatives. This year, Episcopal Charities will grant nearly, and has just, and will again, $650,000 to support the work of its ministry partners, representing the largest single source of unrestricted grants for each agency. I want to back up on that. I think this is something that everyone should know, and I think full disclosure of finances is a really important thing. Our money comes from legacy gifts primarily. Although we do 2 mailings a year, it's a nominal amount of income. We do the ball. That's basically what we do to raise money. But our gifts have been legacy gifts from Episcopalians who wish to preserve a social service legacy in the Diocese of Chicago. Having said that, the legacy market is getting slimmer by the day, and many times it is not here in Chicago again at all. It has moved to Florida, it has moved to Arizona, it's moved to Colorado, it's moved to other places, and as our churches continue to shrink, the focus on the people who used to be lifelong Episcopalians and want to leave that kind of legacy is getting smaller and smaller. But we are the ones who take that money. We now have a corpus of about $14 million and do our annual 5% and hand it out. That does not, the money we collect does not go to salaries and overhead. We have a different fund for that. So anything we get paid comes from a different source of income. So we also do capacity building programs to help manage effective governing boards, increase their fundraising, and communicate their ministries. This has become crucially important as the agencies have been faced with a meltdown in the state of Illinois. Most of our agencies made the fatal mistake of believing the state when it came to them and said, if you'll run these programs for us, we will continue to pay you and we'll have this great public-private partnership. And what's happened is places like the Primo Center, Lawrence Hall, Youth Guidance, Cathedral Shelter / Revive, St. Leonard's Ministries in particular are struggling mightily without a lot of reserves. And that's not just our agencies, that is the entire group of social service agencies, be it Lutheran, Methodist, Catholic. They are failing mightily, and we're going to lose a lot of them and see a lot of combination of and mergers going forward. And we will lose many of the abilities we have to take care of those who have lesser abilities. So we explore community-based partnerships to respond to some of today's most important unmet social problems through our New Ventures initiative, and that's really what I want to concentrate on today. We've already, through New Ventures, built something called Ezra Homes, which is in near Englewood. It was 100 homes that we built at $150,000 apiece in conjunction with ourselves, the Missouri Baptist Synod, and the Catholic Church. We would have built 300 homes, but we were changing the demographics of that ward, and the alderman requested that we stop. But in the downturn of 07-08, only 2 of those homes went into foreclosure. And that was, and the $1 million we invested, we got $1,010,000 back from that investment. And those homes are still occupied by working class people in the city of Chicago. We have Waukegan to College, which is a huge, and we were talking about this at breakfast. It started out looking like a charter school project for Hispanics in Waukegan, and what happened was, through doing 5,000 interviews with the families of Waukegan, we realized what they really needed was a tutoring program. And with that tutoring program, what we did was we start kids in 5th grade all the way through high school with their families. We tutor them through that and then take them on college tours, get them into college, and then tutor them and support their families through that college grouping. Some of those kids have already come back and started working in Waukegan. We sent one to Georgetown the other day, but the crucial part of that is that program started with seed money, doing the interviews and all that sort of thing, of $5,000. The next year I think it was $10,000. We ramped it up to about $250,000, and then we ramped it down again, so they're self-supporting. So we still give them some money, but not nearly the large, not $250,000 a year or anything like that. It is a very, very effective tutoring program. The reason it's effective is it was formed by the community. It's what they wanted, how they wanted to run it, and we worked with them to make that happen so that it became their program, not our program overlaid on something that they thought they had a problem with. So that's really the magic of what we do as a group. We work with United Power and other organizing groups to make sure that the community is getting what it needs. One of the things we're doing today is the Fox River Valley Initiative, which is a mental health initiative in the Fox River Valley, where the police are being trained not to, and you've seen this in the papers in other communities, not to pick up mentally ill, but to get them to where they need to go to be evaluated before they're put in a jail system that just holds them, you know, in perpetuity. We're also doing what looks like it's turning out to be a drug and housing program for youth, because the heroin traffic in the Fox River Valley and everywhere in Chicago is immense. And youth get hooked. They think they're impervious when they're in high school. They get hooked on the heroin, and then they go on to, like, you know, need money, steal from their parents, get kicked out of the home, have no place to live, and it becomes a real problem. So we're working on that initiative currently. We've also done an initiative down in Peoria where we bought an old Catholic schoolhouse and put about a half dozen different types of social service agencies that were already in existence, but they're now working together through this East Bluff group, which is what it is down there. And that's been very, very successful. We are a 501c3. We do not get any money from the Diocese of Chicago. The bishop is our head of our board. He has veto power, but we are not we are a division, but not accountable to the Diocese of Chicago. We have our own our own board that directs us. You've had, I think Brad Summers is the board member from Grace right now, who serves with us. So just so you know that. Some milestones. When we first started, the first appeal was in 1957. It was the United Episcopal Charities appeal. We raised $37,000 and supported 8 agencies in those days. In 1960, we became a 501c3 in 2000. So you can tell there was a big gap between 2000 and 1960. From 1960 to 2000, we supported many of the charities you see on that card that I handed to you. In 2000, we started the New Initiatives Ministry, which were grants to local congregations to help them develop programs for their unique needs. This is not about feeding programs from churches. We do not support, although some of that is included in that, programs that basically are soup kitchens once a week, or however churches do that to feed the poor and the hungry. Usually these programs are, encompass medical care, They encompass feeding, they encompass housing, they encompass various and sort of different things. Like Ravenswood is a good example of that. So, then we started in 2003 capacity building, and capacity building is sort of a weird term, but really what it does, our agencies sometimes become lost because they have no one to talk to. So we go in and we help them reformulate their boards, reformulate their development departments, and sort of their mission. Only when asked. We don't impose on them. We give them grants. That's not, one does not necessarily follow the other, but we work to do that so that they can improve. And we do that all the time. We have a huge project going on right now in DeKalb County. The Roberts family up there are great supporters of Episcopal Charities, and we've worked with the DeKalb Gardens, for instance, to help them formulate their sort of a misericordia type entity with a huge farm that they bought, employing people with handicaps. We've worked with their community trust in DeKalb. We've worked with a couple of the other employment agencies up there. So we really go out into the neighborhoods and work with these groups, not necessarily to give them money, but sometimes just because many times when people have a not-for-profit, they really don't have a bigger picture of what they need to do to make it effective. So that's part of what we do. We have given away, and this is a good number, over the last decade, $11 million, which is a pretty good size number. And we still have 14 million left, so we were doing something right. The highest our endowment has ever been is 16 million. The lowest is 8 million. So that's what we're doing. So let me say this: there's one other program that you may be familiar with that we have been involved in, and it's going on the shelf for at least a year or maybe more, and that's the Julian program, which is the Episcopal Service Corps program. And those are volunteers, they're post-college kids who came to live with us at its height. We had 27 in the program. They're not all Episcopals. We've had everything from Hindus to Jews to, Episcopalians, and maybe even a Presbyterian thrown in there here and there. And what these kids are doing are spending a year in communal living and doing discernment. It was a great program, very effective. We then placed those young adults in agencies. The deal was pay us $14,000 a year. They get a fairly active and smart employee. They don't have to pay insurance for that employee, and they were well used throughout our system and even in other organizations like Refugee One and the Industrial Areas Foundation and different places. The problem being is that none of the agencies are collecting from the state of Illinois and have no money to pay us. And so without that money, we would have to go into our endowment and actually float the program with our endowment, and that's about $400,000 a year. And although it has not been voted on yet, the program pretty much is going to be shut down for the coming year. We don't have a roster of volunteers. We actually turned those over to other Episcopal service corps around the country. We do not have a executive director of that program currently. We still own a house that we could start it up again in and may do that. We offered it to the diocese and they chose to pass on it. So we're gonna close that for the meantime. It was an effective program. Was it creating future Episcopalians? Maybe, I don't know. But it certainly gave some young adults a great year of discernment, and many of them have gone on from there to do some great work. Where we're going, and we're working on a reformulation of what we do today, is the grants that we give the traditional agencies are great grants. They can use them always. Everybody can always use money that's unencumbered. But many of the agencies have other sources of revenue, and we feel that the special projects, the new venture projects we work on for 4 or 5 years at a time are a better investment of our money. Now, having said that, whether we write checks and give grants to all the agencies that we currently have, or whether we start new ventures, it's still the same money. I mean, it's still coming out of the same pocket. The difference being is that many times when you have a new venture, you can find other donors who want to support it. Whereas the traditional agencies, they're pretty like people who support them, those who learn about them, know about them, and give them money. It's like your Holy Family Schools that you take care of here, which is, I applaud you for that. But we feel that our money is better invested working on new projects. And the reason I am here, and the reason I asked to speak, and thanks to your leadership here, is that if you have projects that you're working on in conjunction with other churches or other social service agencies, we would love to talk about those. If you have new ventures out there that you think are improving neighborhoods because the neighborhood wants it in Chicago or in the metropolitan region of Chicago, then we would love to have a conversation about that and see if there is some way that we can be helpful in that. We will never totally cut loose our traditional agencies, but instead of giving them a grant of, say, $80,000, it may go down to $20,000. And we will adjust those grants. And we have a new method. Leslie Pilot-Gatton, who goes to St. Paul the Redeemer and does a lot of work with Richard Tolliver on the south side, and Jan Parkin, whose husband is the rector at Holy Comforter in Kenilworth, our head of our committee which gives away the money, and they've really honed the criteria a lot more, and they're making the agencies a lot more accountable. Much squawking, much running to the bishop and saying they're being mean to us, but I think as we go forward in the future, it will be a lot better and a lot more effective use of our dollars. So that's really who we are and what we do. I rarely get a chance to come out and say, hi there, Episcopal Charities is something that you support. We're really grateful. But here's what we really do. And here are the agencies we're supporting currently. Most people think we're part of the diocese. Most people think that, I don't know where they think the money comes from, but they really don't know the immense amount of work that a very small staff, there I think 4 of us currently, do. And Georgiana Gleason sends her regard. She's been with us for 20 years. Otto Reinisch has been with us for 15. And they have done truly MacArthur genius work in terms of some of these projects that they have been able to accomplish over the time. So I think that's all I really had to say, Bob. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, and if I missed anything that you think I should. Oh, let me do one other thing, and this is because of our former board member, Bob Wyatt. We are also helping to develop the Hispanic ministries. Huge immigration problems, most of which are not soluble, but information is very, very valuable. And we were with Alvaro Arica at his church. We do presentations on the current state of immigration law, who can get it, who can't get it. Here are real lawyers that are not going to steal your money and then disappear. We try to do that. The largest single growth group we have in this church in the Chicago area today is our Hispanic population. And all of them are missions still, which is too bad because they really shouldn't be. We really need to get behind those missions of our Hispanic congregants, because they are faithful, they're devoted, and they are growing our church for us, which is a terrific blessing. So anyway, that's what I have this morning. So please let me answer any questions. If you haven't, and a lot of you may have a different view of what we do, so let me answer any questions that I can answer. Please.
On your endowment, you said that you take 5%.
About, yeah.
Yeah. Does that vary with the market and with your earnings?
Well, here's the problem. For 10 years, we've had no return.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's true of any endowment from our agency, the agency's endowments, our endowment. We put it in basically a neutral investment format because it is not our money. It is money that's been given to us, and so what's happened is we were very fortunate between '07 and today, that the market, you know, screamed up again where it had been in basically '07 before. And so we had extra dollars to give away. If we continue to spend at the current rate without any additional income to that endowment, we've got about 8 years left on it at our current giving rate.
Okay.
And at that point, we would shut the door, you know. Well, I worked at the Chicago History Museum, or the Chicago Historical Society in those days. 8% of our income used to come over the transom from planned gifts that we had no planning involvement in, and that were, we had no idea why people gave us that money. Episcopal Charities has worked much the same way. The difference being is that people still are aware of the Chicago Historical Society, Chicago History Museum, and our church, as I say, has been, you know, I can't remember who was sitting at the table today, this morning when we were drinking coffee, said there are 400 houses for sale in Hinsdale. A lot of those people, some may be moving downtown, but many of them are moving to states with better tax structures and, you know, where they feel more secure in the future of the state. And that's what's happening to our church currently. So.
And can I ask who does your investments?
Hewitt, which is basically does the overview. There is an investment committee. It rarely changes. It changes about every, I don't think we would change anything any more quickly than 18 months. If it looks like, you know, foreign third world countries are doing better, we might eventually move there. But it's a pretty boring portfolio, which it should be. Please.
Several questions. First of all, thanks for coming and thank you for your remarks. I don't understand the definition of missions in this context, and you're referring to the Hispanic churches.
Yeah.
Could you clarify the difference between a mission and a church?
Right. A mission, a church supports itself. A mission is supported by from the diocese to make sure that they can afford a priest. Is that correct, Robert?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And just one, St. Helena of Santa Elena is a parish.
Is a parish.
It would be better off if it were a mission.
Right. It's who support. Here's how that should be. They should have a sister church somewhere that helps them along. In many cases, St. Mark's is a perfect example of that. They have 2 congregations, and you know they get a lot of support back and forth. But and Bill, I think you're aware of that. Because,
yeah, he's talking about St. Mark's and Glen Ellen.
yeah, Glen Ellen. But today, yeah, and we've got, I think, 6 Hispanic missions.
That sounds right.
Something like that, or 1 church and 5 missions, or something like that, and they all seem to grow. So, yes, please.
Okay. Question 2.
This is a conversation.
We're continuing from the coffee lunch. Funding. You mentioned that there were instances, at least hypothetically, where you might be donating $80,000 and then go down to $20,000 because other opportunities or ideas occurred. Now, how much visibility do you give to the agencies about what to expect on a multi-year basis so they can plan their activities?
Most of them have been pretty consistent in what they receive from us. When we reduce, it's usually 5 or 10% at a time.
Okay.
We've actually gone up. St. Augustine College, who lost their MAP grants this year, which means none of their students can pay for their degrees. St. Augustine is the only bilingual associate degree college in the Midwest. It is up on Bryn Mawr, Argyle. It's the old S&A studios where Charlie Chaplin was. They basically take Hispanic students and do bilingual education to get them into areas where they can find jobs. And that money comes from these MAP grants, and I can't remember what that stands for, but it is state money to help them get their education. As you know, with the deadlock, that was totally done away with. They borrowed down $2 million, which is their entire line of credit, to help supplement the MAP grants that they were not getting. The state just plugged in 40 cents on the dollar on the MAP grants, so they're still way behind. So this year, we got together with them and gave them some more money. Unfortunately, we do not have the resources to really give these agencies what they would need to stay solvent. We can sort of put a Band-Aid on it, but that's as good as it gets. Some of the agencies that have been doing less and less, for instance, I'll give you another example. St. Mary's, which is our adoption agency, which has been around for many, many years, has a good endowment of their own. We do more capacity building work with them than anything else. We may give them $5,000 a year for a special project or something, but they don't really need our money, and we're aware of that, and so are they. So we basically work together to try to improve their management structure and how they do their business.
Finally,
Yes. No,
are
please.
there any trends in the types of organizations that are being supported by Episcopal Charities?
Not particularly.
Okay.
The only caveat is that we don't want one church doing one thing and writing checks to that church to do that one outreach thing. We want like a food kitchen or one specific thing. What we want is, we want when we support a project, it to be a community project. We want Grace, we want the Lutheran Church across the street, we want some social service agency, we want a group of people involved, a group of community supporters involved, so that we become a partner with others. We're not the only person supporting a specific outreach. We feel many times that churches, they have great programs, but those are their programs. They should be supporting those programs. So we really like a group effort when it comes to supporting a new program. Yes, sir.
With such a small staff, what kind of depth of consulting can you actually provide to a group? Let's just take the case that you were describing, a community of different participants working on some community initiative, or let's say in our case where we're trying to figure out the best way to work with Santa Elena.
Yeah.
And you know, we're just starting that process, and I think it's sort of an evolutionary thing. There are going to be hiccups, there are going to be
Sure.
successes, failures. Can you bring some real consulting efforts or to that kind of a, that kind of an effort or that kind of an initiative?
We can. We have outside consultants that we then pay to come in and do this work. We have a pretty good roster of people who are knowledgeable in different areas of structure, and so we will bring them in, and what we do is we pay for that. It's like when we bring in the lecturers on immigration. We pay those lecturers a stipend. It's not big, but I have done, this is, you'll tangent me here. No, there are not enough of us to do it completely, but we do have support from others that we can employ. The other thing we're doing is we're also doing a lot of capital campaigns for some of the other Episcopal churches in the diocese. And the reason we're doing that is because Ruth Cobb, who was David Cobb's wife, they're now down at Swanee, but Ruth Cobb and I got irritated at the the Episcopal Foundation, because they will come. If they come into Grace and do a campaign and charge you $30,000, that's one thing. If they come to a church where the whole campaign is $300,000 to $500,000 and they're charging $30,000, then it's like, really? You should be able to do this themselves. So we spent a year in Gurnee helping them do a campaign which netted them about $500,000 and saved $30,000. And that's really how it started. They said, how do we pay Episcopal Foundation? And I said, you don't. We'll come and do it for free. We spend a lot of hours out there in the field with services that should be available without a cost to them. So.
And just as a footnote, Michael will be going down to St. Helena's this afternoon. He's got good relations with Padre Luis and other people down there. So anybody who wants to tag along, you can meet us down there around 1:15 or so.
It's a great, and Bob, I give Bob credit for this. The the Hispanic congregations have gotten a huge amount of support from different persons in the diocese, and they're struggling and they need help, and that's our job to help them grow. I believe anyway. So.
Well, and I'll just say, when Bob came to Grace a year ago in January, about,
Yep.
as the outreach minister, we formed an outreach committee, which is Father Wyatt, Dirk, me, and someone who's practicing in the choir. I used to think we were small and mighty, but boy, compared to you, you guys are small and mighty. But we used to have, people could bring any initiative to our outreach program.
Right.
And we would support it.
Right.
And as a result, we supported many things very poorly.
Right.
And we were writing checks. We didn't have any
Right.
integrated community, whatever. And when Bob came, that all changed. And we now have a process and structure where people propose ministries, and they are accepted based on the acceptance level by other parishioners.
Right.
So you can't come in as just one person. And it's an online, this is what they're looking for. We don't support places that have budgets over $1 million. We
Right.
don't support national ones, and
Right.
they're usually tied locally. And it's been much, much, much more successful.
Yeah.
And I'm also working on planned giving, because the more we grow our endowment, the more money we have to give to outreach, since outreach is one of the recipients
Right.
of our planned giving. So we're kind of, he's helped us get our arms around
Well,
it, so we're doing
Don't
good.
let her be modest.
No, I mean, it's.
She's known as Sergeant Major.
That's the right approach. I
Doing
mean,
that.
one, everybody should realize planned giving is, I'm not talking about structuring wills or estates. I'm talking about codicils on wills that basically anybody can pull off the internet and sign and put there. If you believe in the place you're worshiping in, you know, and you have some resources, then there's no reason you shouldn't have one of those. I have one of those. When I was at St. James the Less, when Jim Mathis was our priest, is now he's Bishop of San Diego, but you know, we made a lot of money. We were in the go-go years. We made a lot of money, and we were the same approach to our outreach in that, you know, Mrs. Jones, you know, is supporting, you know, some group over here. Had nothing to do with us or any focus at all, but you know, let's give them, you know, $1,000 or whatever it was. And I don't know that is not an effective approach to. You need to be able to monitor, and that's one of the things we do, how that money is being employed, and is it being employed according to mission, or is it just because they get it, they spend it, you know, sort of thing. So, anyway, it's 9:45. Your service starts at 10, correct?
Correct.
So I'll let you go. I really appreciate being allowed to come and say hello, and hopefully educate you a little more thoroughly on you know, what we do at Episcopal Charities and the work that we do in and for the agencies in our diocese and others that are coming to us. So, and if you have anything, I'm downtown. You can call the main number for the Episcopal Diocese, and they will find me. And we would love to talk to you. Or I have cards if anybody wants a card. I'm happy to give you a card.
I want to say something about the receiving end of these ministries. You may not think that you're individually affected by these, but you would be surprised how many people have actually been have received services from Cathedral Counseling Center, for example.
Absolutely.
Or how many people you have met or maybe hired who actually attended classes at St. Augustine College.
Yeah.
I mean, you're much more affected by these to the people you know than you think. I'll be willing to bet that everybody here knows somebody, and maybe doesn't realize it, who has received the benefit of these ministries.
We need to have more of these people out. For instance, Cathedral Counseling Center, they take Medicare, and that's
It's amazing what they do.
And people can afford it who can't afford or either don't have private insurance, but it's an amazing.
No, thank you. So I applaud you. Keep up your good work. Thank you.